Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. Today we have a returning guest, Mr. Robert Catalan. He is the CEO of Focused Magnetics Incorporated. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me again, Wendy.
And thank you. So when you and I first spoke, I called you Iron Man and Tony Stark because you have created a technology called the Pure Halbach Array, which is in front of you there.
Yes.
And it kind of looks like the Iron Man symbol. That's why I came up with this. But the cool thing is, could you explain what the Pure Halbach Array is so people can understand?
Yes. So very simply, it's a special kind of electric motor or electromagnet, as it were, where you can actually focus all of the magnetic force only to one side. Normally, an ordinary magnet or electromagnet has a north pole and a south pole of equal strength, and that has tremendous disadvantages. And this particular technology solves it, and I'll show you exactly how it works. This is an example, by the way, of a Pure Halbach Array electric motor. This is the rotor, the part that spins, and this is the stator, which we've made transparent, which, as you can see, is very different from any kind of electric motor out there. You can verify that yourself through the web.
If you find it on Google, you know it's true.
So we're done.
Pictures in Google Images
or Firefox, whatever you're using.
I would like to go show you a few slides to explain exactly what Halbach arrays are, and I'll just put this down very quickly. I hope you don't mind.
No, please.
Okay. So it's kind of heavy. It's massive. So okay. Is that better?
It's a magnet and a workout. Got it.
Yes. Yes, it is. So let me see. I will go through the slides very quickly. So why are we talking about focused magnetics? The number one reason is climate change. Okay.
Yes.
The International Energy Agency says that 40% of all the energy that the world produces is consumed by electric motors. But it says household appliances as a certain percentage, electronics, vehicles like trains, electrochemical. Guess what? All of those things, household appliances like refrigerators and AC units, they all have electric motors. So actually, it's more than just half of the world's energy is consumed by electric motors. And that's why making electric motors much better than before is absolutely essential. Okay?
Okay.
Now, look at it. Look at this. I can show you actually a video of a professor from London in 1970. This is a 65 and 75-year-old stator. And this is a 2022 Tesla Model S plaid stator, and they're virtually identical.
Huh.
And I can show you, if you don't mind, I'll show you very quickly a clip from 1970s. Okay. Hope you don't mind. Very, very quickly.
No. This is fascinating.
Yes. Okay. This is Professor Eric Laithwaite of the Imperial College in London, and he will tell you the same thing, because sometimes people don't believe you if you say it yourself, right?
Oh, yeah, I can relate.
Two electric motors. This one built in 1914, and this one 50 years later. So in the intervening time, new developments in insulating materials for the electric wire and new magnetic materials for the magnetic poles have resulted, together with an increase in the cooling facilities in the small machine, enabled engineers to produce this dramatic increase in the power available from a given size of motor. But inside, the shape of the two machines is the same.
Okay, so very, very simply, what he's saying is what I've been repeating here. A 65 and 75-year-old stator is identical to a Tesla Model S plaid motor. And doesn't that just blow your mind? Right?
Yeah, because we all thought it was brand new technology, and clearly not.
Absolutely. This is state of the art, supposedly, right? Tesla Model S Plaid, but it isn't. Okay, so what's the problem? The fundamental problem is, as a kid, children are taught to wrap copper wire on a nail and connect it to a battery, and all of a sudden they can pick up paper clips from both sides, both ends of that nail.
Yeah.
Right? Every kid has done that. Now, the point is that even if you use the end of the nail, the sharp end, or the head of the nail, it can pick up because the magnetic field is the same both ways. It's 50% north, 50% south. Now, in all of the electric motors today, and without exception, including the Tesla Model S, each of these loops, just like this loop, has 50% magnetic energy facing the rotor, the spinning part of the motor, and 50% of the magnetic energy going outside towards the shell of the electric motor, where it's doing nothing. It's wasting energy. It's converted to heat. It is just causing drag. Okay. So this particular motor of ours is the very first one that can focus all of its magnetic energy only between the rotor and the stator. So there's hardly any magnetic energy wasted anywhere. Okay. Here's how I explain it best. Okay. Say you were to move a house. You move your house and you had a gigantic refrigerator and you needed people to come along. And the mover said, okay, we'll bring 4 people to you. But the 4 people are actually Siamese twins. So in an ordinary electric motor, the Siamese twins are identical in height, identical in size, and because they're conjoined back to back, just like a magnet has a rotor and a north pole and a south pole for the stator, and another north pole and the south pole for the rotor. Again, simplifying it to just one each, right?
Yeah.
Only the 2 people facing the work can actually lift the object. And this is true in all electric motors today, including the Tesla, as I just showed to you. Now, these 2 are grabbing anything metallic, and they're causing the work to be harder than it should be, right? They're consuming energy for 4 people, even if 2 of them are not doing anything. Imagine that half of the world's energy is this way.
Yeah.
And engineers are adamant that this is the best way, and that is completely wrong, especially with the threats that we're facing right now. California is again on fire. Montana was underwater. All of these other places are experiencing floods that are only going to become a daily occurrence, or at least a monthly occurrence.
Yeah.
Now, what does focus magnetics do? What we're doing is that we're using what's known as a Halbach array, and you can look it up on Wikipedia. So, focus magnetics invented the electromagnetic version of a Halbach array. A Halbach array, as discovered by Klaus Halbach, pertained to permanent magnets only, meaning magnets that are, permanently North Pole, South Pole, and you cannot control this. You cannot turn a permanent magnet off or on. Okay, so it's not very useful in an electric motor. But in an electromagnet, which we've invented, an electromagnetic Halbach array, you can control it. So what we've done is we've taken the energy that was being used by these 2 outward-facing twins, and we shrink them to about 3% the size. And it's possible to shrink them even more. But they'll always be there. And we give the energy instead to the 2 workers who are actually doing the work, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, if you grow to nearly twice your size, if you're at the gym and you suddenly become Arnold Schwarzenegger, pushing weights is so much easier, right?
Yes, definitely.
So the main point here is that it's still the same for people. There's no additional energy needed to increase the performance of the electric motor. So what are the benefits then of doing that? Again, I need to emphasize that there's no additional consumption, and yet you're nearly doubling the capability of your electric motor. So what happens? The benefit is simple. For an EV, you can go nearly twice the distance on the same range. Oh, sorry, twice this distance on the same set of batteries.
Oh, wow.
Okay, or make the EV more affordable for everybody by reducing the amount of batteries and yet providing the same range, right?
Yeah.
So the batteries are the most expensive part of any EV. Imagine an electric aircraft today, they are weighed down by those batteries. That's the biggest concern. That's the flight weight, the takeoff weight is too heavy because of batteries. You can reduce that and yet still provide the same amount of power. Again, my emphasis here is nobody in 130 years has done this. Okay? So what are the other potential applications? Power generation, robotics, earth-moving equipment, semi-trucks, MRI. The reason why MRI is at the basement of a hospital is that it's too heavy to put on higher floors, right? We can reduce the weight of MRI by half so that it'll be less expensive, less dangerous, because all of the magnetic force is focused only in that aperture and nowhere else. Today, if you approach an MRI floor, they'll tell you, remove anything metal on your body or it'll be ripped out. As a matter of fact, there was a young boy who was killed while being inside that MRI machine. An oxygen tank flew from 2 rooms away into the MRI machine and killed him.
Yeah, I've heard of that happen.
And that doesn't need to happen anymore with this technology.
Because it's focused in one direction. Like you're taking both sides and you're just pushing it together into one direction,
Right.
maximizing the efficiency.
So let's talk about climate change again. And the number one reason why we have this explosion in CO2 levels is tailpipe emissions. Okay? The United States right now only has 33 miles of high-speed rail. China has 22,600 miles of high-speed rail. If you go visit Paris, you just take the subway and you're literally anywhere you want to go. You can't do that in the United States. As a matter of fact, here's a funny anecdote. When I first arrived in the United States, I had a conference booked just 2 roads away from my hotel. I tried to walk 2 roads away to my hotel. I could not get there.
Oh, no.
I was in the highway. I was on the highway, and I didn't like. How can I get there? I booked specifically to get to my conference center, just 2 roads away, and I could not get there. Imagine that was so frustrating for me.
Oh, I've been there. I get it. Yeah.
Right after you've been to Singapore, you've been to all of these other places where there's metro, and you just need to go 2 streets away and you can't. So maglev is a perfect solution for the United States.
Yes.
Because you can get there as fast as aircraft, and we need it badly. We need it badly to address climate change. And our technology reduces the amount of material that you need to make it work. And here's the thing. The maglev that you're using right now, developed by Germans and currently being used in the Shanghai airport, as you can see, these are the coils that they're using, the electromagnets that they're using to lift that train. The problem is it's still emanating 50% of the magnetic energy in the wrong direction.
Yep.
It's irradiating the passengers on that train. And so it's also a health hazard as well as increasing the cost of the maglev, as well as making the creation of this maglev system much more resource intensive than it needs to be. This technology that we have, focus magnetics, solves this problem. Okay, but perhaps this is the last slide. The biggest and most effective way of solving our energy problem, they say, is fusion.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, they have what's known as a tokamak fusion. This one on the left is a tokamak design. And another similar, which is a little bit more of a crumpled or twisted tokamak design called a stellarator. And this is its particular design. Now, notice this. I hope if you go back to the kids winding of that nail, they're doing the same thing. They're relying on a loop. Okay, the nail is not there, the circular nail is not there, but they're relying on loops.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a big problem, a very big problem. Why? Believe it or not, Joel and Wendy, both of you have seen a working fusion reactor. You've seen it. You know it. You love it every day. You just look up into the sky. It's the sun. The sun is a working fusion reactor.
That is true.
Okay? We have to follow the clues given by nature. What they're doing here is they want to create a sun-like capability inside a donut. This one and this one. The sun, if you look up into the sky, it's not housed in a donut. And that's why they're saying that it'll be decades away for fusion reactors to happen. Because they're not looking at what works in nature. They're trying to force their technology and make it happen. Okay?
God.
Doesn't work as well.
Exactly. So what focus magnetics has done is we have a breakthrough, and I announced it, right? It's a completely different thing because we're not limited to these loops. These loops are there because they want to confine the plasma inside that thing. If they design it in any other way other than loops, it won't work for them. Because you need that magnetic force to be contained in that, right? The magnetic force to contain the intense heat. And we can actually focus all of the magnetic energy only on one side so that we're not limited to these loops. We're not limited to a donut shape.
Yeah.
The sun is not enclosed in a donut shape. So, again, this is why focus magnetics is so essential to the solving climate change, solving the energy issues, solving the tailpipe emissions. Please, if you have any questions, that's all I wanted to show. I think it was faster this time and easier to explain, right?
Much easier now that you have the visuals, because the first time we spoke, it was a little. Yeah. Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, so my biggest question is, so obviously, and I don't want to just talk about one auto manufacturer here, but what you've shown is kind of like the technology has never evolved except to make it smaller. It's the exact same technology, only smaller. That's kind of, so what do you see as the biggest obstacle for getting a change to go from what people have been using for 50, 60, 70 years to transfer over to a new technology? Because change, we're not very good at it. So
Absolutely.
What's your biggest obstacle that you've run into now that you have this before you? How do you get people to implement it and to be open to it?
Professor Donald Sadoway, who is an expert in batteries, has a very good example, right? He's saying that when Sony discovered the lithium-ion battery, Sony asked the assistants and support and tried to convince a lot of other manufacturers to use lithium ion for a long while. And I think you remember we were on nickel metal hydride and all of these other batteries which didn't last long. You charge it, use it once, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
It took a decade for the industry to actually adopt lithium ion. And this is kind of similar, but because of climate change and because of the popularity of electric vehicles, I think that will change very quickly.
Are you finding that corporations are more open to having these conversations and figuring out how they can, because the reality is, as we've said numerous times on the show, you follow the dollar. And if this is a
Absolutely.
way to bring the car costs down, or whatever industry or technology it's for, if you can bring it down, people are more apt to be able to afford it and spend it and boost it. So do you
Absolutely.
find that that these industries are open to this?
Well, believe it or not, the EV manufacturers, they practice what's known as vertical integration, right? So they want to own every aspect
Right.
of their cars because their profit margins are so slim. Now, I think it was McKinsey reporting that for Germany, for example, 50% of their costs in every car is actually management cost. That's not the same for Tesla, I'm sure, but it's very hard to convince these people
Right.
to adopt this. Why? Because you have the not invented here syndrome. You've got a lot of engineers already there, right? Whose years of experience, whose proposals,
Yeah.
whose projects are, they're going to be scared for their salaries. They're going to be scared for their careers. If
yeah.
all of a sudden the management realizes, oh, guess what? This guy has come up with an electric motor that's far better than whatever you've been selling me for the last 20 or so years, right? So it's difficult to get in there because the executives themselves, and that's where a guy like Elon Musk is fantastic, because Elon Musk is technical enough to understand what works.
Right.
And he doesn't buy the, sorry, pardon my French, but doesn't buy the BS from his engineers for stuff that doesn't work. And that's why things rapidly evolve at Tesla, whereas in other companies, the executives are finance managers, they're bean counters, they don't know a thing about the technology, so they just accept the word of their engineers as gospel. Right?
Which is interesting that you bring that up, because I think we're starting to see that more and more as these new companies are emerging, whether it's Tesla, Rivian, Fisker, Faraday, VinFast. These are all independent companies that are able to streamline the process, make a decision, and run with it. So it's not like you're saying, it's not you have to go through the executive board of, multiple meetings, run it through the categories and the different organizations within the structured, and then go back and forth. So I think we're starting to see the industries, and not just auto, I do think this is going to start happening in a lot of ways, where it's becoming more of a streamlined process, where it's like, nope, we're going to try this. Let's figure this out. And you have like a month.
Yes, I surely hope so. And we've experienced both ends. Actually, just last week we had a presentation with one of the top defense companies, because the defense companies need the very best technology. No excuses. If you've got the best technology, they will adopt it. They're not too concerned, I should say, about vertical integration.
If I can just jump in real quick, one of the when you talked about with military implications, I recently learned that during one of our Afghanistan wars, our troops were targeted at nighttime when they would turn on the generators.
Absolutely.
They could be heard. They knew where to shoot. They knew where to fire. So that's when they started to adopt solar and renewable energy, because it was quieter.
Right.
So that's a huge implication for having something quieter.
Yes.
Aside from the carbon emissions, quieter for the safety of our troops. That's gigantic.
Right.
But I love the transportation side because our transportation here is not great. We all know this. And to have, magnetics, quiet, efficient, more efficient than what we currently have, pushing trains along, we could solve a lot of our logistics issues as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's applications for this for the private? I mean, obviously, a lot of things I do believe start with it being military use. We do know that, things will start there, they get trickled down into normal day-to-day use. Where do you see this? Where do you see the potentials for somebody who's just working at home? Like, what could be the uses for them? Like, I mean, I'm thinking long-term, obviously, but how could this be used for somebody in their own home?
Well, one of the things which one of the products that we're looking at actually is every electric motor is also a generator. It all depends on what spins the rotor, right? So there's what's known as a vertical axial wind turbine, a VAWT. Okay. So a smaller motor, let me see if I don't mind. Yeah, a smaller motor like this.
Oh.
Right? Sorry. A smaller motor like this can be powered by a vertical axis wind turbine, a very small household wind turbine. Now, what we're developing combines everything that the household would need.
Interesting.
The thing is, look at the Ukraine today, and you'll ask those directly in the line of fire, what are the basic things that they need? They need water, they need communications, they need power,
right.
And pretty much that's it. And if you can provide that, drinkable water, right, power, communications, and if you can combine that, if you were right now, say in Montana, you were in the, in a place where you had no help forthcoming, people in these situations, in these dire situations, they need this. And here's the thing, like you said, right? Follow the money, or people need this, but that's the difference between, do people want it? Right? Because want is different from need.
Oh, yes.
We could offer a vertical actual wind turbine that has communications capabilities that can provide you with clean, drinkable water, provide you with a way to charge your cell phones or whatever. But then again, will it sell? That's the question. People definitely need it, but the question is, will people actually buy it because they want it? Usually, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yes, usually people buy things for emergencies like flashlights and batteries and supplies only when they see something wrong coming. But with climate change, nobody's reacting the way that they should.
And there's so much pushback on it. I mean,
exactly.
Solar has been around for a very long time, and there's so much pushback against it. So I mean, and it's not just from the consumer, it also comes from the power companies, as well as there's a little bit of the government right there as well, because there's pushback against going this way, because then you start impacting the power plants, and then you start impacting the revenue, and again, follow the money. But now we're also looking at what happens to these solar panels when they become obsolete. Are they just going into landfills, and what's the ramifications of that? And we're seeing that. So I love this thought, because I know there's a lot of talk on wind power right now. And I know there's this, they're talking about the solar farms in the ocean. I love this idea, because if you're able to take something like this where you can harness that power and it goes to that's just, the implications are mind blowing for what something as simple and small as what you just showed can do for all of us. It's incredible.
Yeah. It's endless possibilities
per household. For as a good example of this is, if you were by the seaside, you can toss this out the side of your dinghy or whatever, and it could provide you with power, communications, clean, drinkable water, and it'll work.
Wow.
Your mind is scary yet very impressive, because I'm like, no, I mean, anybody who can sit there and think of these things and really put them together, I'm always very impressed by, because I'm like going, that's not how my mind works.
Well, that's why we have people like Robert.
Thank you so much.
So Robert, because we're at our 30-minute mark,
Yes.
how can people find you? This can be used in any capacity, quite honestly.
Yes.
I think the dire emergency we need is buildings and transportation
Yes.
for
Absolutely.
energy resources.
Yes.
How can people find you? Well, hunt you down, get you to implement your materials.
I'm on LinkedIn, so anybody can access me through LinkedIn. Focus Magnetics is on the web, though it's still in stealth mode. I have an email address for everybody to use. That's contact us at focusmagnetics.com, and they can contact us through that.
Perfect. Now, guys, look up Robert. This is the second time we've had him on because his invention is quite remarkable and a game changer for our energy issues and our transportation issues that will not go away anytime soon unless we adapt to new technology. This is what Robert's done. He has created new technology. So, Robert, thank you again for coming. You're doing wonderful things.
Thank you so much for inviting me again.
Of course. And yeah, we love having you. So, guys, take care. I'm Wendy Nystrom with Environmental Social Justice with my co-host, 𝑗𝒏𝒈. Thank you again, Robert. Y'all take care. Bye.
Thank you so much. You guys take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.